Hi everyone, Stephen Janak here with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. Welcome to Aggie Horticulture Facebook Live. Of course, we're not live today. This is a pre-recorded video because I wanted to bring you to my low maintenance at-home garden. And today we're going to talk about freezes and how plants interact with freezes and how to really understand the different types of freezes, because that's going to help you determine how to best protect your plants. So the first thing to know, and the most important thing I think to know, is that there are two types of freezes. And the most common type that occurs in Texas is what we call a radiative or a radiation freeze event. And this type of freeze event happens when the sky is clear, we really have no clouds at night, there's no wind blowing, it's very calm at night. And the way that the earth cools is that we actually lose heat from the ground and it radiates up towards and is lost to the atmosphere. And that's important to know, because when we have a radiation or radiative freeze event, even though the thermometer may read 36 degrees, the surface of the earth and also the surface of our plants may actually be colder by several degrees. Case in point, and this is the reason I bring you to my low maintenance garden. A few weeks ago, the 1st of January, we had a hard freeze, our first freeze of the winter. It was about 24 degrees at my house. I used some nice blankets and I covered my plants. You can see the sticks that I've cut from oak trees here to keep the blanket from laying on top of the plants. And yes, I've got pepper plants here in December, January, just trying some different things because wife and I love peppers. So we covered the plants for 24 degrees, took it off the next morning, and they were perfect. They were unharmed by the freeze. Well, I think it was about a week later, and the wife and I were coming home, and it was supposed to get to maybe 33 degrees that night. And I looked at the temperature on the thermometer, it said 36 degrees. And I said, honey, it's dark, I better get out and cover these peppers before it freezes. Remember, it was 36 degrees, but I came out here and these plants had already frosted. You see, like this one is a great example. The very top of the plant has been frozen and is dead, while the lower parts of the plant here are still healthy, green, and alive. And that is directly due to that radiation type freeze event. Even though the thermometer read 36, because of the heat loss from the surface of the plant to the open sky and to the atmosphere, the plant surface actually froze before the air temperature got to be 36 degrees. So that's a radiation or radiative type freeze event. The other type is called an advective freeze event, and that, of course, the conditions are opposite. There's a strong wind, there's usually cloud cover, and when an advective freeze event occurs, everything is the same temperature because that strong wind is mixing the air and it's passing over the surface of the plants, and so the plant surface temperature is actually going to be exactly the same as the air temperature during an advective freeze. So because radiative or radiation type freezes are the most common in Texas, what we can do to protect our plants is simply reflect that heat back down. We don't have to have a perfect tight covering over our plants during a radiation event if it's only going to be a few degrees below freezing or near freezing. Just simply having a cover. If I had taken a sheet of metal and placed it and hovered it over the top of these plants, that would have been enough to save them, because that heat would rise, reflect off of the metal, and come back down, keeping these plants warmer than the surrounding area. But if we had an advective freeze event, remember back to February of 2021, that horrific and historic freeze event that we had? Remember, the wind was blowing so much and there was ice and snow blowing. That part of the event was advective. And if we had just put a simple sheet over the top trying to reflect heat, that wouldn't work, because that wind blowing is mixing the cold air. So let's go over and take a look at some citrus trees I have, and I'll show you and demonstrate that point again. So here we have some citrus trees of various types. Last year I went out and dug up some wild trifoliate rootstock, planted them in these pots, and then the following spring and summer I bought some budwood and I've budded on different types of citrus. We have some limequat, some Meyer lemon, some pineapple orange, and there's a grapefruit in here somewhere. So we have varying types of citrus, and they were right here for that 24 degrees event that we had first of the year. And all I did, because it was a radiative event, was took several blankets like this, and you can see I've got my little stakes to hold the blankets off from pushing down on the trees. And I just threw a few blankets around just like this, kind of closed it around the trunk, made sure it came down to the ground so that any heat that was rising from the soil would be caught underneath this blanket. And of course, it worked very well and protected all of these types of citrus, including the more cold sensitive limequat that we have here. Okay, so I wanted to add this to the video kind of as a supplement and to help people understand how to kind of look at the forecast and interpret what the forecast is showing us to determine what type of freeze we might anticipate in the next coming day or several days. And so I really like using weather.gov. They have a nice hourly forecast graph that you see here on the page. And it can be a little bit overwhelming at first when you see all the stuff going on, but we'll break it down, and it's really pretty intuitive. And of course, there's other apps and websites and places that can give you an hourly forecast with all these details too. I just find that the weather.gov site works well for me. So here we see several different graphs, 4 different graphs right here. And of course, this is hourly. So it's starting, let's say here it started at 9 a.m. on Thursday. So that's the day and time that I'm recording this. So here you see 11 a.m. Thursday, 2 p.m. Thursday, and right here is midnight on Thursday. And so of course, that's what we're looking at here. We're looking at Thursday, Friday, and part of Saturday morning, the very first part of Saturday morning. In this first graph, you see the red, the blue, the green lines. Of course, here is your legend. The red is the air temperature, blue is wind chill, green is dew point, and we're not really concerned with wind chill. The plants don't really feel the wind chill, so that's not important to us. But let's look, for example, Thursday night and early Friday morning. Of course, typically temperatures reach their lowest point right before the dawn. Typically this is how it happens. The lowest temperature overnight is just before sunrise. And we see that, of course, is the case here. And they're forecasting for my location about 32 degrees Thursday night or early Friday morning before sunrise. So about 32 degrees, right about freezing. But is that going to be an advective freeze event or a radiative freeze event? And so we go down to the next graph here and we look at the wind speed. So the surface wind speed is the line here. And the gusts are indicated by these little flags that stick up off the points. Those indicate not only the wind gust speed, but also the direction of the wind. So these flags pointing straight up means it's a wind coming out of the north. And the more flags on that, the harder the wind gusts will be. So you can see very high wind gusts today, Thursday, got heavy high winds, 22 miles per hour, and gusty winds, and those are going to taper off, and those gusts taper off, and it starts to come more out of the northeast, and then we get into Saturday over here, and it really comes out of the east and maybe switches to the south. So when we look at the conditions for Thursday night, early Friday morning, we're about 32 degrees, but it's going to be windy. Going to be windy all night, 14 degrees, a strong north wind. And we can go a little bit further, go down to the third graph here. Remember I talked about what determined a radiative versus advective freeze event was the wind speed and sky cover or cloud cover mostly. So we can come down to the third graph here, and on the blue line, they're showing us the predicted sky cover, the predicted amount of clouds in the sky. And so right now, today, it's pretty cloudy. As I look out the window, it's 90%. And so they're saying for Thursday night, early Friday morning, we're going to have essentially 100% cloud cover. So we're going to have cloudy conditions, good strong winds, And so everything is going to be about 32 degrees because these are the conditions that are set up for an advective freeze event. So everything's going to be about 32 degrees. Of course, this is a forecast, and I'll probably go tonight and about 10 o'clock I'll check the forecast again and make sure that nothing has really changed too much. If we go over to Friday night and early Saturday morning here, of course the temperatures go lower and lower throughout the night and are lowest just before dawn. Looks like they're saying about 28, 29 degrees from my location. And then we look at the wind. And this is an interesting example for me. The wind speeds they're saying here about 7 miles per hour. We go down to sky cover. Oh, sky cover, the cloud cover has really dropped off, about 15, 17%. So we're going to have mostly open, clear skies. So does this really add up to a radiative freeze event? And one thing I didn't tell you earlier is that the definition of a radiative freeze event is wind speeds less than 4 miles per hour. So is this going to be a radiative freeze event? Well, as it stands right now, as the forecast looks, no, not technically. It's not going to be a radiative. This 7 mile per hour sustained wind speeds will be enough to keep the air mixed and keep everything the same temperature. But again, this is probably a situation where I would go in Friday night, Friday evening around this time, check the forecast again and see, well, did the wind speed, the predicted wind speed change? Did the predicted sky cover change? And so that's going to help us determine what kind of freeze we're going to expect, and again, how we can best protect our plants. So back to the video. All right, so we're back in the garden again, and we have some of the same plants here. So we have more citrus here. Of course, you can see the citrus rootstock, the trifoliate rootstock that I've got planted out here with plans to come and bud and graft them one day. And of course, these weren't harmed. These rootstock, trifoliate citrus can handle very cold temperatures, which is part of the reason that we use them as rootstock, to impart some cold hardiness to the fruitful varieties that we like. And the trifoliate rootstock is supposed to go dormant and lose its leaves during the winter, but these are not. And so this was a pineapple orange that I grafted onto the trifoliate rootstock, but this one, as opposed to the ones up front, was unprotected. So you can see how the freeze at 24 degrees really roasted the leaves on this plant. Fortunately, you see the stems look green, they're flexible, they're healthy looking, and so this tree should recover just fine. It's going to lose its leaves, but it should come out in the spring with new leaves and do just well and recover. And the same thing happened down here. I've got 3 more limequat trees that I've budded, and of course they got hit by the freeze too. But you see, this one is a good example. See how there's no leaves on top. These leaves got hurt by and burned off by the freeze, but these lower leaves did get some protection from heat radiating from the ground, and so they were okay. They weren't burned, whereas the top of the plant here is all burned. So that's a little bit about freezing. I hope it was informational for you, help you make some decisions next time, because it's still January, middle of January, and there's still a chance we're going to have some more freezing weather before we get into really springtime. We're also going to put some links to some of our publications in the post for this video so that you can go read more about the different types of freezes and really how to protect your plants should we have another freeze this year. Well, that's going to do it for me. Thanks for being here for Aggie Horticulture Facebook Live. My name is Stephen Janak. Thank y'all. Have a nice weekend.